In the winter of the year 40, during the reign of Gaius Caesar, better known to history as Caligula, Rome lived under a climate of political terror. Ancient sources agree on one thing. The emperor used power not only to rule, but to humiliate. Rituals and protocols were imposed on the nobility with a single goal: to publicly break the dignity of Rome's most powerful families. One story, repeated across generations, tells of Marcus Claudius, an elderly senator forced to stand as witness while his own bloodline was disgraced inside the imperial palace. This was no isolated cruelty. It was part of a carefully engineered system meant to crush the Roman elite from within. Administrative records even listed names and numbers of those compelled to pass through the palace's bronze doors, reduced to entries on parchment. Violence became procedure. Degradation became policy. Caligula's aim was not only to inflict suffering, but to ensure the victim's involuntary complicity. Fear became a political tool. Shame became a permanent scar on the Roman Senate. To understand how Rome reached this abyss, we must return to a bright morning in the year 37, when a 25-year-old man was hailed as the empire's salvation. Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, called Caligula after the little military boots he wore as a child, was the son of the beloved general Germanicus. His rise to power was met with euphoria that lasted nearly 100 days. The people saw him as the heir to a glorious dynasty. Senators exhaled in relief after the suffocating paranoia of Tiberius. No one imagined that this charming, educated young ruler would become the architect of the most methodical system of corruption Rome had ever known. Caligula's childhood was forged from both privilege and terror. He grew up in military camps, adored by legions who worshipped his father. But he also witnessed the palace intrigues that ended with Germanicus dead, likely poisoned. He saw his mother, Agrippina the Elder, exiled. His brothers were imprisoned or executed. In Tiberius's court, Caligula learned to survive by pretending to be harmless, foolish even. Those years of wearing a mask taught him a brutal lesson. In Rome, survival depended on deception, and he mastered it. His early reign seemed promising. Taxes were reduced, political prisoners were freed, grand spectacles filled the city, roads were repaired, aqueducts restored, bonuses distributed to the legions. Rome adored him. Women scattered flowers before his path. Children sang songs in his name. Senators competed for his favor. After the dark years of Tiberius, this felt like a golden age. The contrast was striking. Where Tiberius had hidden away in Capri, Caligula walked openly through the streets, attended games, dined with senators. He was accessible, generous, magnetic. The people believed the gods had finally blessed Rome with the perfect ruler. Then, in the autumn of 37, everything changed. A mysterious illness struck the emperor, leaving him bedridden for weeks. Court physicians recorded raging fevers, violent convulsions that required several men to restrain him, and delirious visions in which he claimed to speak with Jupiter himself. Rome held its breath. Sacrifices filled every temple. Some citizens vowed their own lives in exchange for the emperor's recovery. When Caligula awoke, he was no longer the same. At first, the signs were subtle. He ordered statues of the gods to be altered to bear his likeness. Soon after came acts that stunned even hardened senators. Those close to him noticed his transformation. His once warm eyes became cold and calculating, his gaze unnervingly fixed. He stopped sleeping, wandering the palace at night, speaking to statues, to the moon, to enemies only he could see. Servants found him at dawn in the gardens, covered in dirt, claiming he had been planting the future of Rome. What he was planting were the foundations of something far darker. It began within his own family. His sisters, Drusilla, Julia Livilla, and Agrippina the Younger, were not just relatives. They became the first subjects of his unraveling mind. His fixation on Drusilla was especially intense. He called her his Diana, seated her in the place of an empress, and treated her as a partner in public ceremonies. When she died in the year 38, Caligula collapsed into violent grief. He outlawed laughter, feasts, even bathing during the mourning period. Those who showed joy paid with their lives. But this grief was not love. It was possession denied. After Drusilla's death, his attention shifted to his remaining sisters, and then beyond them, to the households of the Senate. What followed was not chaos, but design. Encounters were orchestrated, observed, and recorded. Reactions were noted. Obedience, hesitation, resistance. These records later became instruments of control. A senator who complied too eagerly found himself voting in perfect alignment with imperial wishes. One who hesitated might lose a son, or see his family shattered as a warning to others. The message was unmistakable. In Caligula's Rome, no one was innocent. No one was neutral, and this was only the beginning. The transformation of terror into policy required structure, and Caligula ensured it had one. The imperial physician, Lucius Scribonius, left behind records hidden for centuries in a deserted villa near Pompeii. In them, he describes, without emotion, how he was ordered to examine the wives and daughters of patricians, assessing their fertility and physical endurance. These examinations were conducted in the emperor's presence. Caligula asked obscene clinical questions about anatomy, making notes as if overseeing livestock rather than human beings. This was not random cruelty. It was bureaucratic. Every woman received a number. Every act was documented. Fees were standardized. 16 sesterces for a senator's wife, 2,000 for his virgin daughter, 5,000 for both together. The money went directly into the imperial treasury, registered as voluntary donations for the welfare of the state. Violence, once again, was converted into accounting. The palace itself was redesigned to serve the system. Caligula called it the Temple of Divine Service, and he meant it literally. Entire wings were repurposed. The Hall of Jupiter was reserved for ritual violations, where the emperor performed as the supreme god, blessing his subjects with divine seed. The Chamber of Venus forced Roman matrons to reenact mythological scenes. The Room of Priapus, decorated with obscene frescoes commissioned from Rome's finest artists, was reserved for sexual torture. The travertine marble walls that once echoed debates about the fate of the known world now absorbed different sounds. And the senators who had built the empire walked those corridors daily, hearing everything, knowing everything, saying nothing. The system grew in complexity. First came the senators' wives, assigned schedules, specific garments, transparent Syrian silk togas worth fortunes, and rigid rituals. Then came the daughters. From the age of 12, they were introduced gradually through what Caligula called divine education. But even that was not enough. Secret documents reference a selective breeding program. Women deemed most fertile were forced to conceive children who would be raised as imperial property. These children would never know their parents. They were trained from birth to serve the emperor alone. Every pregnancy, every birth, every infant death, frequent because many women attempted desperate abortions, was meticulously recorded. Men were not spared. Caligula instituted the feminization of young patrician boys. They were dressed in saffron-dyed tunics, their faces painted with white lead and vermilion. They were taught how to walk, gesture, and perform femininity. At banquets, they were paraded and auctioned for a single night. The emperor participated occasionally, not out of desire, but dominance. Every violation was a message. Nothing is sacred, no tradition untouchable, no family immune. The most perverse element was forced participation. Fathers were not merely aware, they were involved. They held torches. They signed contracts labeling their wives' and daughters' service as voluntary. They voted in favor of laws like the Lex de Divina Corporis, which declared the emperor's body sacred and any union with it a religious honor. Caligula had discovered something more devastating than tyranny: enforced complicity. He did not destroy families from the outside. He turned them inward, making each member an executioner of the others. Senator Publius Cornelius attempted resistance. When ordered to surrender his wife Livia to divine service, he refused publicly in the Senate. It was an act of courage and suicide. The next morning, his 8-year-old son was found alive, but mutilated on the Senate steps, a message carved into his skin. Disobedience has generational consequences. Cornelius complied that afternoon. 3 months later, when Livia became pregnant by the emperor, Cornelius was forced to recognize the child as his legitimate heir, renouncing his own sons. The Senate unanimously passed a decree stating that any child of the emperor, regardless of the mother, superseded all legitimate heirs. Humiliation was no longer personal. It was law. Maintaining this system required a bureaucracy rivaling the empire itself. Specialized scribes maintained a secret archive beneath the Palatine. Each entry followed strict categories: name, age, social rank, physical description, acts performed, duration, level of cooperation, resulting pregnancies, payments received. Physicians documented injuries and diseases. Midwives attended forced births. Guards transported victims on precise schedules. Accountants managed the profits. Hundreds of people kept the machinery running. Each performed a single function. Each diluted their guilt within the collective. No one saw themselves as the monster.